I'm super proud to bring you Chorizo Funk, my friend Eddie, who I've known for over a decade and moving on the second decade. And he needs the introduction because there's so many accolades here. And we have 4-time Best of Austin DJ with Austin Music Awards. No?
Austin Chronicle.
Austin Chronicle. And then 2020 Austin Music Award. And by the time this comes out, it'll be the second time 2022 Austin Music Award.
2023.
2020. I don't even... Time, what is it? Flat circle, we don't know. You were the 2021 inaugural stadium DJ for Austin FC. What does FC even stand for? Fire Clan? What
football
is it?
club.
Cool. And I actually,
Sports.
for the record, exactly. For the record, I do prefer soccer. I could actually watch a game of soccer more than I watch a game of football. I love Ted Lasso. Fuego, you work with Fuego.
Fuego ATX.
Fuego
correct,
ATX.
Correct.
And you guys have lost your shit to Body Rock. I've been there, but I also look at pictures and videos. You're sweating, your booty sweat there, and loved. It's accepted, and he did that to you. Like your ass was sweating, responsible for it. And also someone I admire deeply. I've watched this journey. We're gonna get into that. Like you're gonna be like, wow, that's like a long time. This is like some frog and toad shit, and it is. And I love him so much. Again, Chorizo Funk. Thank you for sitting with us today. Hey. Beats Within is about the conception of this was, we were talking with Christina and our friend Mike. And then Ben came into it, but it was about, we've been here for so long, we've been doing it. We want to talk about the culture. We want to talk about this. We're obsessed with subcultures also. Like that is like one of my main obsessions is any type of subculture you can get into. I mean, like, even if it's a furry aspect, I'm like, tell me everything.
Yeah.
And so this was like, the point of it is like talking about your journey and what you've learned and, where you're going, where you've been, all of this shit. So this is what we're going to talk about. And sometimes maybe a ghost story or an alien story, which I love. So prepare. Let's talk about beginnings. So
all right, let's talk about it.
I need y'all to know that we both worked at Apple in 2005, 2006. When did you actually get into Austin?
I got to Austin in fall of '98.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
From El Paso?
No, from the Panhandle, Texas Panhandle,
Canyon,
Texas.
Is that where you're from?
Yeah, that's where I went to school.
Okay.
I was born in El Paso.
Okay.
All my family was like there.
Right.
I'd spent a lot of time there, but I actually went to school up in the Panhandle.
Okay. Which school was that?
Canyon High School.
Okay. I don't even understand the Panhandle. I've never been there.
Not a lot going on.
Not allowed to go down there. But tell me something phenomenal about the Panhandle. Like, what would draw me in?
I would say in my opinion, some might get a little mad at me, but I think the only thing in the Panhandle
fight us about
is Paladuro Canyon. Canyon.
I was wondering, like, that was like the
that's where it's at.
Right?
Yeah, and it's amazing.
I think, like, isn't there also, like, one of the tallest mountains, like, out there, too? Is that near the Panhandle?
There's no mountains.
Okay,
it's plains.
Fucking plains.
Yeah.
But El Paso also, like, and I've talked with Omar, Kid Monks, about how anytime I meet somebody from El Paso, I'm like, salt of the earth. Like, y'all are good fucking people.
Yeah.
And then there was this thing, too, that Omar had told me a long time ago. He's like, anytime you meet somebody from El Paso, they're usually in pairs. Like, did you come here with anybody from? Did you know anybody with El Paso when you got here?
No, I didn't. I mean, coming because I was going to school in the
Yeah,
Panhandle
right.
in a small town, Canyon, Texas. I don't think there was anyone from my school that was coming here, so I was just completely like solo. Like I drove here solo.
You're like
moved in solo.
Graduation hat on. You're just like, fucking, let's go, dude.
Yeah,
Like,
I was ready.
How did you know that you wanted to be in Austin? What was it that brought you?
So I actually had a cousin that was going to school here when I was in high school, and she was here finishing up, and I came to visit. And then after that, she moved to Houston when she graduated, and I also went to go visit her in Houston to go check out U of H. And it was between U of H and UT.
Which Houston we love as well.
I love Houston.
But
yeah.
Austin late 90s was, I mean, this is still a magical city, but Austin late 90s was this, I graduated in 98, and I remember like getting into the rave scene in like 97 and we would come here every once in a while. I was like, I fucking love this town. I'm from San Antonio. And like, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like,
Yeah.
It was deeply felt. And the thing about Austin, too, is that, like, I feel like if you're meant to be here, it'll always find a way to keep you here.
Yeah.
And so, no matter what, like, if I was like, I don't fucking job. Like I'm trying to figure it out. Like something would always kind of come along and keep me in the city. So were you like going to any parties here, or was it just the vibe overall?
No, it was just school. At that point, I was just like, I mean, at that point, coming from the Panhandle, I didn't know really anything about nightlife.
Yeah,
I
okay.
didn't really know that much like about like. I mean, I loved like hip hop and R&B at the time.
Right.
So I was a big fan of that. But like in terms of like DJs and club culture and all that other stuff, I didn't. I hadn't been to a club yet.
That is so interesting because when you sound like little babe. And when I met you, like that was still very much an innocence of an energy there. Like you were working, and I think like the IT support
tech
part,
support. Yeah,
and I was working in customer support. I remember like I think I can only imagine. I know the moment that we had a discussion about your next steps, which was DJing, and it was near the entrance of Apple, and I was coming down. I looked beat, of course, because I was probably fucking getting yelled at for somebody's like 3-year-old child's iPod that was late being delivered during Christmas. Like fuck them. And like you were beat too from fucking telling somebody no.
How to turn on the computer.
Right, the CD-ROM is not a donut holder, which actually was a thing that somebody thought, and we were like fuck. And you were,
the cubicle life,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was like what do you want to do? And you were like, I want to DJ. And I was like, oh shit, really? And you had at that point so much vinyl. Right?
Yeah, I was starting to buy vinyl like, already at that point.
At that point, right? Because I know that like the next thing that happened was after you started DJing, it was when Serato came out, and you were like, now I have to take all of my vinyl and run it into Serato. So were you DJing and bringing your vinyl to the club? Or did you immediately start DJing when the Serato came out and you were like, now it's time to feed it in?
So like when I started, it was all vinyl at that point. And shortly after I started, it definitely kind of took me a while to kind of like get into like clubs. So there was definitely like a few years where, I was like practicing and maybe do like a house party or, like a friend of a friend kind of like thing. And at that point, I was pretty like hardcore about like DJ culture, like coming from like the hip hop DJ background. So it was like, no, like Serato like is whack, whatever.
No, of course,
like,
right.
People need to earn it, like this and that and whatever. Oh, the fidelity, the records just sound like so much better. And like all these like kind of like ideas that were happening whenever like this new kind of technology was coming in, and that was the kind of the reaction I had. With a little bit of time, like a few years, I was like, okay, like I'll incorporate it, I'll let me like check it out, you know, and I started to kind of like, get more, learn more of the technology at the time. So it was kind of like a gradual progression to like get into that.
And it's also the back, right? The back pains. You're like, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like carrying records, to a gig, and turntables and mixer and sometimes speakers, that is a lot. And yeah, so I have that experience of like doing it, and that's how I kind of started. And yeah, it's the convenience now is just like, amazing.
Yeah, right. No, yes.
Which, has its positives and negatives.
Right. And even now, like as Pioneer has released Record Box, right? Like where you don't even, bring your laptop places. Like I would still, if I were to play out, because I haven't had that much experience on Record Box with the waveforms screens on it, I would still have to use my laptop and like understand that. But it's crazy how it's like, well, just bring your thumb drive.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not a Record Box DJ myself.
Yeah.
So I still have to have a computer of some sort. But
like
even still,
I need
like
a big visual.
Yeah, like I've just kind of been in that mode. Like, the school of DJing I came from was always like, yeah, you have, all your music available, on your laptop versus like Record Box where it's like, all right, you're making playlists and that kind of thing. But the idea of just going somewhere with like literally a thumb drive, that is amazing.
Right. But also you can lose that thumb drive. I know people who I have exclusives nobody else has on here. Now I've left it and like
multiple
left
friends
it.
at the end of the night, whenever, the end of the night's been a long night, and
totally.
The thumb drives sometimes go missing.
It's funny about like the attitude also that you mentioned with like, I feel like that point of time, everything was like, you gotta be hardcore. And there's so much happening too, right? Like there was like, b-boying was like that, right? Like breakdancing was like that. Like you had to do it a certain way or else you weren't this. backpack rap. It has to be
a lot of
lyrical.
rules.
So many rules.
A lot of rules.
And I don't think that same attitude has carried over, which is good because you have more freedom as an artist, right? You're not constricted.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I was coming up with like a lot of rules, a lot of pressure, a lot of like, impress your peers.
Right.
And, there's a right way to do it, all these other things. And, because of that pressure and because of all those things, like all that, like it did make me a better DJ.
For sure.
And so because I spent so much time like, practicing, and like there was like all these kind of like, rites of passage you kind of had to go through.
Yeah.
And so like the positive of that is that it did make me like technically like really, really strong. And so now, it's like I have that base, I have those skills, I know all those things. And so now whenever like all the new technologies here is just like, I feel like I can just like take off.
Right.
And then it's like, oh yeah, like this is like super convenient or whatever. You can take advantage of all of the aspects of the digital DJing world that you can't, replicate, with vinyl. And so, there's, with a lot of things, like there's pluses and minuses,
Totally.
Because of all of that pressure, it luckily I didn't break under the pressure,
right.
which is definitely possible, but I didn't. And like I cut my teeth, through that way. And so, like I, it was just a really solid like foundation.
It was hard. Like we
It
were
was
even
hard.
having
It
like
was hard.
discourse over jeans at that point because it was like the flip from like hip hop baggy jeans to tight jeans, and like Lil Wayne brought that. He forged so many paths for us. And, probably face tattoos as well. It's like where so if you have a face tattoo, thank Lil Wayne, I think. What was your first gig? Was it house party or was it club?
House party for sure.
Whose house party?
I think it was a friend, Juan and Randy. I think they had moved into their apartment, recently.
Love.
And they were like, hey, you're DJing, bro. Like,
How did you meet them? Was it Apple or was it?
It was actually through when I was at UT. There was like a big kind of friend group that kind of formed out of Mecha. Mecha was like this politically active Chicano-based student organization.
Oh, sure.
And there was like a big kind of friend group that kind of like we all kind of befriended each other. And so it was like Juan I met through that kind of group. And yeah, so it was just like, a house party. And at that point, it was mostly like records that I had kind of like a lot of like records from like Goodwill. Like I was really kind of like starting out.
Which is hard to find good records at Goodwill.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it was like back then, like if it really was easier or if it was just like I was just starting out, so it was like
Half-price books, Goodwill.
But that was definitely, I definitely had like some records like from there. So yeah, it was just like, whatever I kind of had,
Party rockin', selector.
Yeah. I mean, trying to party rock, like it was beginning, beginning, really basic, mixer about like, I don't know, it was like a $50, $75 mixer, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was, and it was kind of like that way for a little while, like I would say, or then, there was friends that I knew that were like part of like nonprofit organizations or whatever. So maybe like a benefit, you know,
right.
And that kind of thing. And that was kind of like the beginning.
Where did you go to school for?
So I actually have a bachelor's in social work.
Okay.
I don't recommend it.
No, I know. Like my mom, she got her bachelor's in what is social work? What's the what is it called? Not socialist, but she also was one. She was brown beret and fucking. I remember like I have
okay.
like old
so,
school
like,
fucking socialist like communism flags and
little silk. So part of like the Chicano movement.
I don't eat grapes. Because when I was 8, she showed me the documentary Grapes of Wrath, which is about the migrant farm workers and how the pesticides was making malformed babies with like no arms and legs. And so like that was 1988. I swear to you, I've only bought like 3 bunches of grapes since then. And whenever I eat them, I'm like, I can't finish this bag. Like it's like it's so ingrained, right? Like
I remember like the art where it was like what was the brand of was it grapes, I believe? where like they had like a skeleton, like kind of like on the artwork, like it was like a
Yeah.
political cartoon
Yeah.
of it, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, they're
So it's like, this is also like you've carried over, like you've never abandoned that. You've carried over
Right,
that
yeah, it's
into,
definitely.
like, even with Fuego ATX, right? Like that's a very
Right.
community oriented, empowering collective.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first club?
I don't remember technically my first club, but I would, I guess, consider this kind of like one of my first club experiences. I played at on 4th Street. It's no longer there. It was 219 West. It was on the corner across from the coffee shop.
Yes, yes.
What's the name of the coffee shop?
Halcyon?
Halcyon. Across
Bad.
from Halcyon.
Not good coffee.
219 West. It was on the corner there. At the time, it was kind of like a little posh.
Blue.
Kind of.
Like it had a blue.
I don't remember the
neon
colors.
logo.
So
Okay.
definitely neon.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like a posh, kind of restaurant-y,
Yeah.
kind of like place where, people can kind of eat and they would have music and that kind of stuff. And
And
so,
you're
yeah.
doing funk, or like, are you
This
still using?
was, at this point I was starting to kind of get, like I had, my vinyl collection had been growing where I could do like, like a club, downtown. So it was definitely like 90s hip hop,
Yeah.
early,
Yeah.
2000s, club hip hop,
Right.
and like maybe a little bit of funk or so. And yeah, that was like one of my, first kind of like experiences. And then aside from that, kind of like the more regular thing, like the first kind of like opportunity that I had like regularly was Plush on Thursdays when DJ Tots had his, I think it was called Throwback with DJ Tots or whatever. And he kind of gave me like essentially kind of my first opportunity to really like get like on, because he had heard me. Because actually, for one of the community-based things, I had reached out to him because at that point, Tots was like literally, one of the most like exciting, like most amazing DJs in town.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him, to come and do like this fundraiser for this like community event.
Yeah.
And I think I opened maybe like for him or something like that or whatever. And he was like, hey, he was always just really cool and really chill.
Yeah,
he was like, hey,
very pro.
you should bring some records and, play, sometime.
So
and I was like,
adorable.
really?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I would open up, and so I would, roll in there. He was using Serato already at the time, and I was rolling up with like a crate, of records and stuff.
Right.
And that was really like the first, like, person, who really kind of gave me, the opportunity and kind of like, some of the crucial kind of experience.
Yeah.
It definitely kind of takes some time for you to be out in front of people.
Tatsu, again, like he is Ramen Tetsuya, one of your favorite, if not your favorite, ramen shops in town.
So
What's
good.
your order there?
Always just go with the original.
Yeah,
Just kind of
can't beat it. I do
yeah.
the sukumen now. Like it took me a long time to build up there. Now I can't get away from it. Like that's just like you pour the little sauce on it, serve the noodles. It's so good. So you're doing. I remember like also for a minute, catching up with you after you left Apple. And now you're full on DJing, and your other side gig was mixing for Stardate on Co-op and PR, which I was like, shut up, because I love Stardate.
So it was Earth Sky. So it was
Earth Sky,
very
okay.
similar to
Yeah.
Stardate. It was called Earth Sky, and so yeah, we were syndicated throughout the country on NPR stations.
Yeah.
And it was all, they would interview scientists, and I was doing stuff with like Tots and stuff, and getting into like there was like a few kind of like underground like hip hop shows like I would play at at the time, and then I would say like the next kind of like opportunity that came my way was B-Boy City.
Yeah.
And whenever I had finished, I had actually worked at Johnson High School, which was a high school on the east side.
What were you doing there?
I was doing an after-school program there. And so through that after-school program, it was through Cine Las Americas. And they were tied in with Romeo and B-Boy City. And they had like a B-boy, B-girl class.
I did after school with that also. I did middle school, and I was teaching them how to break dance. That was funny.
That was kind of like how
Yeah.
I got like introduced and kind of like met, like mostly Romeo. Romeo was kind of like the main one that was going. It was Romeo, Santos, Recon.
Love Recon.
And
Salt of the earth.
And so then, love Recon. And and at that point I was just like fully like into like hip hop underground culture.
Of course.
And so they were having B-boy cities, and so I would go and like kind of volunteer-esque, like just kind of go, like I would also like take some of the kids in the after school program, kind of chaperone them, there and stuff.
I'm gonna cry.
And so, I was just like really around it. I was just like amazed. My mind was like blown, and I was just like really impressed. And then I kind of started to like learn, like the ins and outs of like DJing like b-boy events.
Right.
And so I was like practicing
which is like there's
funk.
doing breaks and funk. It's difficult to blend any of that, right? So like if you're doing for a b-boy battle, you can't do like, oh, next record now. You have to figure out a way in because the dancers are going. They can't just be like, hold on, he's changing records. I gotta wait for a second. And be like, no, you gotta like keep going in.
Yeah.
And so like that's also upgrading your mixing and blending ears and skills.
Yeah, and that was like a huge kind of like another way to kind of like just develop my skills and stuff. And it was hard because then too, like B-Boy City and them, they were like, who's this? Because they had their DJs, they had their DJs at the time.
Girl, they were asking me like, they've been asking me who am I since I fucking got here in 2006. Like, who's this bitch? They were like, you know who she looks like? She looks like the fucking chick in the Mitsubishi commercial doing this. And I was like, maybe I did that.
It was a tough crowd. It was a really tough crowd.
It was.
And finally, like one day, they're like, hey, like there was an event at Rutamaya, RIP.
Right.
They had like some, like it wasn't like a full-on competition, but just like a jam or something. They're like, hey, why don't you like bring some records or whatever, and like we'll see.
Like also that criticism too, like that made me better as a dancer, and like that like makes you, because you're like the all eyes on you type shit. So that like keeps increasing your skill set.
Yeah, and so at that point, like the pressure of it was built up, and so it's like, wow, I finally got this chance, and so I have to like, I have to do well. I have to like impress them, and I did well enough that they liked my set, and they had me back, and then I kind of started to get a little bit more involved, and then maybe like a year or two down the line, it was like, all right, like you're like, the official, like Baby G was kind of like retiring, kind of like transitioning out of like DJing as much. And Rome was like, yeah, like you're, the B-Boy City DJ now, like, so for like the jams and all that other stuff, I was like, part of it. And yeah, so that was kind of like the next kind of like big, opportunity to kind of like develop my skills and improve myself.
I did an event at Rutamaya. You played for me. You DJ'd for me there, yeah?
I think so.
I think so, right? Because it was I had the wheel spin of different genres, and I made people like dance to whatever genre that was. And like, that was a fun event. I like made it. My brother actually made this wheel for me, and I would spin it. And if it was like, okay, we have funk and we have like hip hop, then people had to like do that thing and like make sure that they're matching the beat to that. And then we also traveled to San Antonio event.
Like to the different jams and the b-boy events and stuff.
Was that the event where Recon and my homegirl Pebbles, like they were up against each other in the last battle? I don't know if you remember this. It's like one of my favorite, fondest memories. And it's like Recon and Pebbles, and they're the final round, and they're like going for the title. And somebody spins a Michael Jackson track.
I don't remember this.
And they're battling each other, and they both are also extraordinarily, like, Pebbles is like ballroom trained salsa, Recon's dope ass salsa dancer, and they're battling each other, and then a track comes on and they start dancing with each other, and we're like, yo, like they're like literally like doing fucking like, they were like, hey, it's a competition, we don't know how to score this right now, get back to your side. That was an amazing time. But yeah, we traveled, we did some breakdancing events, and then from there, I told you, it's a journey. Peligrosa is next, right? After that?
Let me see. Actually, no. We started Body Rock. I started Body Rock with Riders Against the Storm.
Okay, so what was your conceptualization for Body Rock? What drew you in?
Well, so at the time leading up to Body Rock, that was whenever the Do Over that was based in LA was.
Party.
doing a lot of, they had a lot of their, they would archive a lot of their sets like on their blog, like on their blog spot, I believe.
Blogspot.com.
Yeah. And yeah, and you know, me like coming up like as a DJ, like they had like so many like DJs that I looked up to and introduced me to a lot of DJs that I started to really follow and just really like admire and be inspired by. And you know, I would listen to the mixes, and essentially like the concept of, you know, of the mixes of the do-over sets was, you know, there would be the DJs playing, and there was like a few rotating hosts, and they would kind of, you know, interact with what the DJ was doing and also interact with the crowd, and kind of just really kind of help to like solidify and kind of set like the tone of the party. And I always really just loved that dynamic. And you know, through B-Boy City, like there was, you know, those elements like were there. But that was definitely kind of like more on like, you know, a B-Boy vibe. And this was more just kind of like a general kind of like party. Yeah. And so, you know, I was, you know, kind of like doing like a few things at different clubs here and there, and, you know, still working and, you know, full time and stuff. And, James Taylor, who had just started managing at that point, Plush.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had met each other through, you know, mutual friends, you know, actually when we were both in college. And, you know, had to kind of been acquaintances and friends, you know, as, you know, we were like getting into nightlife.
Yeah.
And he reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, Eddie, you know, I have an opportunity for you if you want to if you want to start a monthly." And this was going to be like my first monthly, you know. It was like, "Hey, if you want a monthly, you know, have second Wednesdays at Plush." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, "Let me think on it." And, you know, I had just met Riders Against the Storm. Riders Against the Storm, that is who I started Body Rock with, if, you know, you're not familiar. And they had just moved into town. They had only been to Austin like literally like a month.
Right.
And we had met, and I had seen them perform with a live band before, and I really just loved their energy. And so in my brain, you know, I was like, oh shit, like, what if, you know, I don't have to carry the burden of doing this party, you know, by myself. I love what they do. I can, you know, focus like on the music and just try and be like really kind of like dynamic and interesting, and then we'll kind of like have this whole kind of like thing back and forth or whatever. And I pitched it to them. I was like, "Hey, do y'all want to like start doing this party?" They've been in Austin like a month. Like they were looking to like make, you know, leave their mark. You know, like they were here to do music.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Hell yes,
energy.
like let's go."
Yes.
And that was essentially like how Body Rock started.
Yeah.
Was that? So it was second Wednesdays at Plush for about a year.
Yeah.
And you know, it was definitely rough.
Especially Plush being so small.
Plush being so small.
Very, very tiny venue. It is no longer Plush, but it is on the corner of 7th and Red River. I forget what it's called now, but it's a lounge. Go in there, though, if you're interested at all to understand like what the history was.
It's like a shotgun.
It is definitely a shotgun.
Like
yeah,
rectangle.
You go in. And imagine also being in this club, like, because again, Ramen Tatsuya is on Saturday nights. We had, you know, Table Manners crew, which is Dirty Harry, Dig, Kellen, Tatsu, and then Crown also came in at some point towards the end, but breakdancing in there. So this club is packed, and we're also breakdancing in the back, and like that's again like cutting your teeth on like these, you know, trying to make sure that your skills are, you know, fine-tuned in these difficult situations, is trying to breakdance in literally a space that's like this. I don't know if you can see the coffee table, but I mean it's
tiny.
a fucking 5-foot diameter situation. And grateful for it, right? And like James Taylor as well, also just being so connected in nightlife in Austin. I rode bikes with his wife. We did the Wednesday night ladies ride with Fast Folks that my friend Natalie owned the shop, and we would rampage the entire city. Like we would just get Wasty Face 5000 and like cruise like 20 girls at least on bikes, like mobbing 20-mile rides at night, and then going to like Dirty Bills or like Plush and like doing like 3 car bombs and like 3 pints and being like, get on my bike and drive. I don't recommend it. That time is over. We're very conscious now. We don't do that. So I'm doing Lyft, and I was talking to these 3 dudes I picked up at Hotel Vegas. No, Voldstead. They're in the back, and I guess it was Friday night. And I guess there's a dude back there that DJs also like disco. They said it was like power disco that I haven't been there. But we brought up Body Rock because I was like, do y'all ever go to Sahara Lounge, right? Because that's where Body Rock is currently being held, right? And they were like, oh, this guy, in my front seat, he was like, yes. Like, he was like, I fucking love that. He's like, it's total sweat fest. All the stuff. And the two guys in the back hadn't been there. And they were like, he was like, it's far east. The guy was like, far east side. And they were like how far east? Like, fucking, like, I forget what it was, but it was not far enough. It was like end of 6 is where they mentioned. Okay. And they were like, no, bitch, you haven't seen this part of Austin yet. And it was like, I was like, are they still giving like free rice and beans? Because they used to do that back in the day.
Yeah, still making beans.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Eileen's still cooking it up.
Dude, you can go to Sahara, go to Body Rock, get there early because the beans will run out, but she will feed you some nice. You get a bowl of beans. You go outside for a little jointy, dude. Big one too. It's family, it's soul. It's if you're looking for connectivity and I think best. If anything, if you're new to Austin and you're like, I'm trying to get in and understand what Austin is and what people love about this town, because people come here for live music, right? Like that's the thing that draws them in. I think still, I hope. But the Body Rock party is like one of those things. I feel like it's Body Rock and what Kellen does on Fridays at Barbarella too. Like those are the number one things. Those are two things that whenever I'm out and about and like I'm around people I don't hang out with and they mention it, it's those two parties for sure that are staples in town. And it's great. It's like the thing that I was talking about with Mez in our interview where it's like when I see the flyer, when I see the videos, when I see the photos, obviously when I'm there or like, I know I'm home. Right, like in an ever-changing city, and especially when I'm around traffic, I'm like, this fucking town, I can't get anywhere. It's changed so much. And then I'm like, oh, I'll see like a Mez piece, and I'm like, I'm still home. Like these are still my fucking place. I still love this fucking town. So again, thank you for all of that. Thank him. And so now we're doing Body Rock, and eventually you get into Peligrosa as well, right? You're doing
a few years after after Body Rock started. At that point, leading up to the Body Rock was making the progression and getting more into essentially like cumbia records and all different kinds of like Afro Latin rhythms and stuff. So just musically, I was just like really, expanding and
each
stuff.
Level, right?
And I was getting booked for different like showcases or parties or events that were more like cumbia centric, Latin music centric. And I believe friend Alba, she booked a show at Beauty Bar. And this was kind of one of the still in the beginning stages, like for me. And she, booked me and then also Peligrosa as well. And that was kind of like when I met them like in the DJ like kind of context and yeah.
What was that there? Because again, El Paso, like, very strong. It's going to be there. I mean, like we're Tejano, like we're always going to have the cumbia, like no matter what, especially like 90s Tejano, fucking the golden era of Tejano, dude, fucking so good. Was that early on in your life?
Yeah, it was, like at the quinceañeras and the bodas and the weddings and stuff. Like,
right.
I would definitely, hear it. And
were you dancing also? You're like Tia's like, come and dance with me.
I was like really shy, so I was like, no, I'm not gonna dance. So they would, like it was more like my older cousins. They'd be like, come on, dance and stuff. And so it was like around, and kind of, I would say I was kind of started to explore it more like myself. Cause before you kind of like, it's around, you kind of take it for granted. It's like in the background. I kind of started to like, look more into it and learn more, like actively, like in high school and in college and stuff, and just kind of started to expand.
As you move away from your family too, you're like, I kind of miss that. You're now bridging back over into like your kind of your roots, and then coming in. So you're actually like now all over, and you do even like Coconut Club. You're doing house. Like there as well. Which is, like Four on the Floor. I mean, people are like, it's simple, but you got to be a good selector. And like going to see you spin there, and I'm all like, I know, it's fucking sick. what do you think you've learned during like each one of these stages? Can you recall any of the learnings like as you're going through and like that are like poignant to you?
I think it's always just kind of been essentially like just becoming more expansive, like just kind of because I think like when I started like early on, I was very like narrow and focused like in one specific like kind of scene, which was like the underground kind of like backpack hip hop scene. And then with time, it kind of, and I had a lot of, like opinions or thoughts about like, like people like excuse me, like people partying and dancing and what kind of music is it really and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I think like each of those kind of iterations, just kind of like, help to kind of like expand. I mean, with, B-Boy City, it was, just like learning how to be, pretty like technical and being able to respond quickly to what's going on. And learning like a lot of like about like deep dive into like funk and soul and all of that and meanwhile like say something like body rock for example was like getting people to dance and like party and like feel good and also like interact because Riders Against the Storm, the MCs and hosts of Body Rock, they're very like they're a crucial part of the party, and so I play off of them like a lot. When I was in Peligrosa, I was definitely starting to dive more into and get more into like cumbia and just all the different like Afro-Latin like kind of rhythms. And so it's always, I feel like it's all kind of like built, on each other. It's like, it's been building blocks and ultimately, it just, kind of, I stopped being like, so like, narrow-minded, about how like my opinions and my thoughts on music. I mean, I still have, whether it's underground or like super rare or whatever, like I still have the appreciation and love for that.
Right.
But that doesn't like negate or like make me, it doesn't like, it doesn't only define me, you know? I mean, there's like a lot of like pop music, that like I like and that work for me like as a DJ. And, because I have so many different things, I never have to do the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm not really resentful like of the music that I play. I have some, DJ colleagues where, they kind of play like the same genre, like kind of over and over, the same kind of like playlists, for lack of a better term. And they kind of like hate, the music they play in a way.
Right.
For me, that's not the case because, I never really kind of, it's always changing, there's always a different kind of vibe, a different kind of party because I luckily, I just have such a broad range of, what I do. And ultimately I always try and bring, my style and my skills to that, those genres or those parties.
Comedians talk about this too, as they're coming to the scene. I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and they talk about their, development of their sets and how there's still people that they've like, they'll go back to the clubs where they were doing their open mics or whatever. And there's still people who are in there and they're doing like the same set. And I think that ultimately there's a part of this. I mean, there's so many factors that brings you into your development, but confidence is the main one. And going back to when I first met you to who you are now, still genuine, lovely person, but the confidence also, has just grown. And when you have that and you allow yourself to break the barriers and break the bounds and try, the confidence like, oh shit, I did that. Like it comes in.
Totally.
And I think for me in 2017, I remember like having this tumultuous time and like getting out of like a long-term relationship and like switching, like companies I was working for and figuring out where I am. And like the one thing setting my intention for is like to have more confidence in myself and what I was doing and know that I have that. And I feel like, was that ever like a conversation that you had with yourself to be like, you look in the mirror and be like, fucking like taxi driver. You're like,
I mean, I don't have a specific memory of it, but I think so because I mean, as I was, developing and getting better as a DJ, it was also like, all right, like what is your kind of like presence and what is, you know, like,
right.
you know, what is your vibe, you know, because initially, yeah, like I was very much just like looking down like on the records and just like focus and just like, you know, tunnel vision and just,
Right.
you know, in a way that was kind of like the easy thing to do is like not like look up and be like,
Right.
oh, like there's all these people here and they're
Right.
looking at me.
Right.
And it definitely, you know, was a process of kind of like getting, you know, comfortable kind of like in that. And then once, you know, that kind of started to hit and once that kind of started to make sense, I mean, it's pretty liberating because, you know, the things that would kind of take up space in my mind when I was actually DJing, like, they weren't there, you know? And like, for example, like Body Rock is, you know, a prime example of that. It's just like, you know, the crowd is like in the palm of our hands, you know?
You're in the flow state.
And so
right.
you're just like kind of like going with it and, you know, and there's still, like, I'm still a very like technical minded DJ. You know, I don't ever, you know, use sync or, you know, do any of those kind of things at all. Like it's all always like live and it's always like organic. But like just getting really like comfortable like in it and just being able like to do it and having fun and, you know, like,
Right.
and partying with people and dancing with people like
It's not
from
easy
behind
to be able to
the
combine
decks.
those things. Like you said,
Yeah.
you're coming up and you're like, I fucking got to make sure this is matching.
Yeah.
And now you're like in that flow state where you're able to like bring in the community. And Body Rock, you know, is like that. And I think that, you know, to a degree, actually, like, you know, I would say what it is when you're in subculture or when you're especially like in the nightlife that's specific to an intentional setting, right? Like I believe that it is. We always say, "Oh, it was church." You know, we do that with table medically. This is church.
Yeah.
It's blessing. Like when I dance, you know, I feel like that is me praying to the people in the earth. You know, and I feel like that's like part of like getting into that trance, right? You're in there and you're touched in with the people and you're bringing it to them. We obviously also know that people can sometimes just. I mean, to be a musician, it is kind of a masturbation of sorts. Like, like you know, you ever watch a drummer, straight up cum face.
Yeah.
But you know, you can tell when
It's
somebody's
very
doing it for
hedonistic,
them.
like
Exactly,
yeah.
right. You can tell when someone's doing it just for themselves versus when they're doing that for the people. And you also come with a socialist background. But you know, like having that is you've always had this thing for the people. When do you think? You know, if you go to school for that, I feel like this is, you know, being for the people is something that you've always been, but can you recall like where you were like consciously being like, no, I'm fucking for la raza, I'm fucking for the people, like I'm for the earth?
I mean, you know, I think it kind of for, you know, I don't know exact. Well, I guess part of it was growing up in the Panhandle and, you know, being a minority there, you know, where I was, you know, like I would hear things, I would see things directed at other people or myself. And it just never really, you know, would sit right with me,
Right.
you know, and that's always kind of like been there. And, you know, it's always, you know, and so whenever I went like to college or whatever, other people that had, you know, kind of similar dispositions, like that's what I
Finding
was
your
attracted
tribe,
to.
right? Exactly.
And so then it's always just kind of been, you know, kind of like a, you know,
It's
a
your
thing
calling.
where kind of,
It's
yeah.
within you, right? Like it's a cosmic, universal situation. But it is, you know, I do
Yeah.
feel like we're attracted to obviously the things that you know resonate with us, and I also believe that there is a, you know, I don't want to say a God's plan, but there is a thing where, you know, I believe there's like a cross pollination of sorts that is essential to humanity, where it's like we need to have these people do specific things and roles in their life. And again, like I believe in free will, and I believe that, you know, like and all
And
this.
then also, like in my perspective, like you also need to have fun. Like at the same time, you also need to
100%,
recharge.
100%.
And so all those things, you know, like it's not necessarily about being, you know, restrictive.
Right.
It's about, you know, like embracing like all those things.
The freedom of letting go.
The freedom
right?
of letting go and having fun and knowing how to like, you know, enjoy yourself. And part of that is like dancing and part of that is music. And then you add that with like an experience with other people. And you know, if you don't have anything to, you know, kind of recharge your battery, you know, like that's
Because you have to honor that
you can't
space.
do, you know, if you're, you know, an activist or you're doing, you know, socially conscious like type of work,
Being
like
militant in it.
you're gonna be, you know, drained, you
Absolutely,
know, and
right.
so that's definitely always kind of been, you know, like kind of theirs,
Right.
and you know, with Body Rock and with, you know, Riders Against the Storm, you know, that's always kind of been like a big thing, and definitely, you know, have seen it, you know, kind of firsthand, because you know, they definitely kind of bring this idea of like, yes, like parties are like, when we think of our parties, it's kind of like the bastard child of ceremony, and it's like we are having fun, like, hey, like, you know, someone's like, you know, twerking on stage or whatever, and
Right.
like, you know, or someone's, you know, like up rocking on stage if they have, you know, like a b-boy b-girl background or whatever, and all of that fits, and all of that like is good, like for, you know, for them and however they do it, and nothing is wrong
Yeah.
with anyone, and there isn't like a judgment of like, oh, okay, well, you know, like the b-boy up rock is, you know, like more respected than like, you know, someone like twerking,
Right.
like,
Right.
no, like
No.
that's not it, like, and that's what I mean is, you know, for me when I was starting, you know, I was just so like, oh, like these are the principles of hip hop, and this is this, and da 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 da, and just so focused on those things, and it kind of like expanded where it's like, oh, okay, it's not such like a black and white thing, and there's not so much like judgment, you know,
Right.
like about it.
To continue on, because I know we've been in it for a minute, and we're almost going to run out of time. But where did Chorizo Funk come from?
So Chorizo Funk. So that wasn't my first DJ name. My first DJ name, which speaks to the underground hip hop vibe that I was on, was originally EB011. And you know, and that was, as you know, I was starting to kind of like, you know, looking to kind of like expand beyond what I was doing and like do like more things, and like, you know, EB-Lo is just, you know, like, in my opinion, you know, and like at the time I didn't have the words for it, but I felt it. It just felt like too like boxed in. It just felt too like specific. You know, I mean,
Right.
okay, if I'm gonna do this kind of set or that kind of set, like EB-Lo, like it just felt like when I first claimed that name, like it felt good, and then after time, like it felt like corny.
Right.
And so already before even I chose EB-Lo, me and a friend, we had a joke, and we kind of used this idea of Chorizo Funk. It was just like a concept. It was just like this idea that could mean whatever you wanted to. It could
Right.
be like, oh yeah, like this, you know, little, you know, bar in South Texas with like a dusty jukebox. Like that's some chorizo funk right there. Oh, like I ate some bad water burger and damn, I got chorizo funk. It was just like this funny like joke that could just mean,
Yeah.
you know, whatever, you know, we wanted to. And obviously like us, you know, being from like a Mexican background, like we would just find
Fucking love
so
chorizo.
many different ways to like,
Yeah.
you know, think of it or whatever. And so it was just like a joke. It was
Yeah.
just always funny. And I was like looking to change my name, you know, and I just couldn't think of, you know, like, hey, like what would it be? And so my ex at the time was like, why don't you use Chorizo Funk, you know? And I was like, no, like that's a joke. Like that's not serious. Like,
Yeah.
you know, me and the friends, we had been, you know, messing around with it. And then for a little bit, like after, you know, I thought about it for a while and I was like, oh, actually, that's perfect.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at that time it was like, oh, you know, like there's just multiple elements, and it's a really kind of ambiguous like kind of thing, you know. And I think in terms of like identity and name and all that stuff, like I think it's been really perfect, and I feel honestly that it has helped me a lot in terms of like figuring out a lot of these different things and fitting into like different circles, and
Right.
and I didn't get like pigeonholed by having like this super like technical like kind of like DJ culture like
Right.
name, you know.
Right,
It was
right,
just like
right.
this really like, you know, some people think it's a band, people think it's a food truck, some people think, you know, some people
Love.
take it like phallic and they're like
Yeah.
that way, it's like, oh, like it's sexual, like some people, think like it has something to do with like digestive issues, like there's just so many like things, and it's kind of perfect. It's kind of perfect.
I love, do you have a favorite brand of chorizo?
I don't really. I do love. It's not a specific brand, but as a style. There's Chorizo Verde, which is there's you don't get it too much like in Texas.
Yeah.
But like I do love some Chorizo Verde.
I get San Miguel. It's good. But it's also the funny thing is that I didn't realize that was the name because I'd always pick by the package design. You know what I mean? Like I was like, this is what we had at home. And then like I was like, whenever I go to the chorizo like section, I was like, fuck, which one is it again? And I had to like just pick like the colors and the logo, and I was like, San Miguel. Okay, like remember that. So it's easier for you. So you're looking at all the chorizos and like accidentally grab the link that's not packaged with the styrofoam, which like not good for the earth, but still very good chorizo. Okay, so do you remember like the song that sparked everything for you? Like when you were a kid, maybe or like even later on in life, like what awoke you to the culture of music?
Not specifically. I mean, I can remember, some of my first, faves, for sure.
Which were they?
I have very vivid memories of loving Crisscross.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
I wanted to wear my pants backwards.
Totally. Yeah, I think
Just
my
cool.
brother
Like, I just thought
definitely
it was
did
so
one day.
cool.
I think I did one day.
I was like, I would say, I think it was the summer of. Maybe it was summer of 92 or 91. And so it's not specifically like a song, but that was definitely kind of like as I kind of started to develop my own tastes. And in that summer, I was spending a lot of time with my cousins on my dad's side of the family. And we were glued to MTV that summer.
Of course.
And so it was just like...
Good time for MTV.
It was Humpty Dance.
Yeah.
And it was what else? It was like Rob Bass, DJ Easy Rocky Takes Two, and just like all like the energy and the kind of like that era. And then to Mellow Man Ace, Mentirosa, and Kid Frost, La Raza, where it was like, like here is like 100%. The like kind of like the Latino
lighter
kind of like representation and lighter shades of brown. And it was kind of like that summer where it was just like I was kind of starting to kind of like develop, my own kind of like taste of watching your MTV Raps.
Fucking so good.
And it was kind of like all those kind of songs, like all that kind of like year. It was
Absolutely.
Just like
Do you hope something changes or grows for Austin nightlife culture, or Austin's culture in general? Maybe something that you just like have been thinking and pining over, or anything that you've seen in other cities that you're like, fuck, we need some of that.
I would say most recently, I was booked in Miami to play Dante's Hi-Fi out there, which is essentially like an audiophile listening bar that's curated by Rich Medina. He's like the music programmer there. And, I played with him.
You? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was me, him, and then this DJ from Dallas, 5D, and it was us three. And Rich opened and then let us play like for the rest of the night, and just having like that experience there. And it's on the audiophile hi-fi like kind of thing, and so it was like all vinyl, like this is. So
you're back to fucking bringing it back around to your roots and shit, which
right.
you have. What we talked about, like the techno.
Yeah,
what
and
did
so
you play?
it was this a lot of like kind of like disco, like funk, boogie, like a lot of just a pretty wide range of stuff, and just kind of having that experience there where it was just like people. One, it was a setting where it sounds great.
Yeah.
And so I would love to have more clubs in Austin that have that experience, and then two, it's a pretty what's the right word? I guess a pretty high profile operation in terms of like the budget and, the people that are going through there, and just everything is just like self-sustaining, like kind of like, like entity versus like just, it doesn't feel like, a bar that is just like scraping to
Yeah.
get by and barely like paying
Right.
their talent or
Right,
whatever,
right.
and
Is
talent
appreciation.
are disposable and that kind of thing. It's like that's kind of like the cornerstone, and it seems like they've been able to kind of build this whole kind of like model around like these things that are like for the culture,
Right.
and it's really like awesome. And there is a Dante's in Austin,
Right.
and there are a few other. There is. I haven't been there yet, but I do believe Howard's is another club that's kind of going kind of in a
MoMA
similar
there, which
direction.
is crazy because I was like, oh, I didn't realize that MoMA, like, I think that's like one of the good things about the growth is that what you're talking about here is the investment and the intention of, promoting the culture and enriching it. There have been those spots, right, that have come through. I saw Mark Farina at Dante's Hi-Fi down here. I saw MoMA, who I didn't realize, I was like, nobody really knows who MoMA is here, I thought. And here I am watching him after like, collecting his records and shit. And I don't think that I would have really had that, even like with Eternal especially too, like that they're bringing in, Berlin Techno and like these other DJs.
And like Eternal is another great example of kind of like that, kind of thing. And so, I would love to kind of see, and I'm hopeful that, more of those things kind of, like are successful and grow here. So it doesn't, like, I would love for Austin, like music wise and DJ culture wise, to feel like a bigger city.
Yeah.
Like obviously there's some great things about Austin kind of being like a small city, but it would be great like to kind of have that kind of growth, because there are those pockets kind of here, and so I would love for them to be successful and self-sustaining, and to have more of them.
I mean, it's the live music capital of the fucking world. Like, why are you shutting down the venues? Like, but again, the hopefulness of having these pop up because, again, like comedians from like Tom Segura lives here. Like we obviously know Joe Rogan lives here, and I think that like Chappelle was coming here for a minute, but they're opening up the clubs to support it, and like so are musicians. Rich Medina for Rich Medina, Philly born, bred and raised, right? I believe he's definitely the Philly DJ. Yep. To say, I'm going to throw this in Miami and in Austin is a huge honor to have. And it's so fucking crazy after hearing about, I'm going to cry again. Like, after hearing about the journey that we talked about, and to know that, like, you just recently went and he selected you to go there and fucking play. Yeah. Like, I'm so happy about it. Like, it's so weird to be like, I'm proud of you. Cause it's like, I didn't raise you, but like, like I am. Like, I'm just, like,
you. Well, so then essentially, like for myself, in terms of like where I've kind of gotten to where I'm now, I guess about 6 or so years ago, I started to connect with my queerness, and that was like its own journey, but it translated to DJing, and so that's been really like crucial in terms of like me becoming like who I am now, because like that's just like a whole nother like dance floor, it's a whole nother place. It's a whole nother like, music. It's a whole nother history that, me being, the student of DJing and the student of music and being very kind of like technical and always trying to like learn stuff. It was like, oh, like here's this whole other world that, has, its own kind of like ins and outs, and that has been crucial for me, because now like it's like such a broad like kind of thing. So it's been really great for me to like expand, beyond just like predominantly like straight parties and events and dance floors.
Yes.
And because it's a whole nother experience, and it's rightfully so, and it's needed. And to be in a place, where queer people can like be themselves and express themselves, because like music and bars and clubs are such like a refuge.
Yep.
And and it's just really amazing to like be part of that and to learn all of that. And so like I've been doing stuff like for all most of the queer like events and parties and organizations like here in town, and also like other places outside of Austin. And it's just kind of like helped, I think, for myself to one kind of like make me a more well-rounded, like DJ.
Yep.
And it's also just, been a big part of like who I am, and to like kind of like tap into it in that way has been really, really like amazing.
And this is bringing back also to the, the topic of conversation of saying, like, again, the refuge, the blessing, the ceremony, the, like understanding that oppressed cultures have always found their way with music, and going back into like, the theory about, I have with humanity, and being like our first language was most likely dance and music before we learned how to form words. And so, just going back to like the refuge of it all, like, your queerness is a whole other refuge for you, because you're being able to expand into further parts of you. And how is that going?
It's been great. It's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely challenging in certain aspects, but like in terms of like fulfillment, in terms of like connecting, in terms of like having a community, like it's been amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're branching out, and there's like that openness and acceptance, because when we're talking about your history up until now, that is very masculine driven.
Yeah, very, very straight, very masculine, very boys club kind of thing. And that's why, there's, things that, I used to be part of that, I'm no longer a part of, because it was kind of, it felt, counter to that.
Yeah.
And, it was just, as I was, figuring things out for myself, it felt very glaring. It was like, oh shit, like this is not serving me anymore. This is not for me
what
anymore.
was the click where I feel as if, when we're coming upon certain realizations like this, it's almost like this overlap of like when you're mixing two records, right? Like they're beginning to come in before they actually ride and groove with each other, and you're like, I'm getting signals. There's only, I can imagine it for you. You can tell me about the experience, but I'm imagining, these signals coming in like, hey, maybe you want in the middle of the career, and you're like, I don't know. And then there's like, the other kind of part of your life that and then it's like, when was that click of you accepting the queerness?
I think it was like a gradual thing, but definitely kind of like, growing up, like there wasn't like, it was such a like rigid world, and it was just like, okay, like I'm this way, just like everybody else. And I'm, like, my peers and my family or whatever. And, I didn't really like, think about it. It just didn't seem, it just seemed like everyone is this way. So yeah, and it wasn't till like way later that it was like, oh, wait a minute, like, hold up. But that's like a whole different experience of like, going into it, like stepping into it, because I think probably there's a lot of, moments or, for numerous people, like maybe they might have, like some kind of like epiphany or some kind of thought, but then they just kind of like, tuck it away.
Condition
like,
themselves
whatever.
to not, right?
I have this life, I have these things, and, things are good, and, whatever. And so, yeah, I think, and so like when I look back, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that kind of makes more sense, like, cause I mean, I played sports in high school,
right?
And I did like all those things, but it was like, yeah, like actually now that I think about it, I was never like, as, competitive as like, this friend or that friend, or I didn't, really like, this aspect of it. And, it always kind of like turned me off a certain way. And yeah, it was just really like kind of like stepping into it. And luckily, I had a lot of, essentially, like mentors, like queer mentors that, I was able to, like talk with, and, they were very like supportive as I was kind of like stepping into things and figuring out. So like a lot of like, a lot of support to like, figure that out. And, and like I said, yeah, it's been a huge part now of me as a DJ.
I love you so much. I love you,
love you
so
too.
much, dude. Like, fucking, I'm so happy that I know you. I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I'm so happy for all the conversations we've ever had. Whenever I see you out, like, it's just like, I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, and again, like looking over the years and knowing that it's been over a decade, it's going on to the second decade, and like how much longer we have. Like, I'm going to cry. Like, how many times have I almost cried in this interview? Like 4 or 5 times. Jesus Christ.
Well, I always love when I'm DJing and I see you out, and I always know like when you're listening. and I'll, put a little something in there for you, and
Thank
to get
you.
your response
Thank
and
you.
to get that,
Thank you. That makes me
that
feel-
positive, because I think, so many of us, we love to see people like really, connect and feel the music, and
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
I
We're
always,
here for church. We're here for
appreciate that.
ceremony.
So
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah.
Well, that is our time. Thank you for tuning in. I didn't fucking give it up for my fucking friend, dude. Look at my friend. Look at him. All right. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.